Hey, what's up everybody, this is Socialcrop1 and today I want to show you guys a new melee Amara build I've been using to farm the Circle of Slaughter and other content that's mainly based around fighting big groups of enemies and not just farming one boss. Now this build is pretty focused on just doing a ton of melee damage and pretty much cleaving that damage around a bunch of other targets around it, being able to clear enemies and big groups of enemies pretty quickly. So first off, something that's very important for how I made this build is the deep dive face puncher right here. Now the deep dive face puncher, you also don't need this anointed. I'm actually not using this anointed for this build, but this legendary weapon in itself has the 60+% melee damage, which helps, but also the shots from this weapon basically shoots out melees, and pretty much what that means is it takes everything you can do on a melee and it puts it in the bullets of this weapon. So kind of you have two melees, and also you can melee and shoot pretty much back to back. So usually there's a small time between when you can melee again, but you could put in shots in between that and shoot instantly pretty much after hitting a melee. So as you see in game right here, I should be able to do it. See, you're basically shooting before like the melee animation is done, almost doubling your overall damage output since your weapon is doing relatively the same amount of damage as your melee is doing because of this specific legendary. So with that out of the way, we can get into the skill build. So first we're going into the Brawl tree. 5 out of 5 root to rise, 10 of extra HP. I want 5 out of 5 clarity. It's 1 extra from my class mod, which you constantly regen HP, and when you use your action skill, it doubles it. So it's a pretty high regen per second. Next we have Helping Hands, which after you use your action skill, you get 40% damage reduction for 15 seconds. We have this up a majority of the time. Then we have Find Your Center. Amara gains increased melee damage, 100% increased melee damage. Additionally, for a few seconds after using your action skill, you gain increased melee range, which is 75%, which is 20-second duration, so pretty much of all the time. Then we have Mindfulness, which when you take damage, you gain movement speed, shield regen delay, and it takes up 25 times, so a ton. That lasts 5 seconds. Then we have One with Nature, more max HP, and whatever element you're currently on, you get a 40% damage reduction to that element. So right now and in the footage, I'll mainly be using Corrosive, but if it's other enemies, you could switch to whatever element, because we will have all three of the elements available to Amara unlocked and able to be used whenever you want. Then we have Guardian Angel, which every 120 seconds when you get downed, you instantly get revived and do an elemental nova that knocks everything back. Super good. You do go down a decent bit, at least in Circle of Slaughter that I'll be showing in this video as the footage as well. You do go down quite a bit, even though this build has multiple things that can actually increase your melee range and teleport you around with melee. And with the shotgun, with that, you can do just really high single target burst damage if you need to. And even when you're downed, you can teleport with your melee. So getting downed in this build isn't the biggest of issues, because you could teleport across the map to stay in range of things to kill them when you're downed if your Guardian Angel is not up. Next we have Blitz, which is basically a new like melee augment. So basically when aiming at a target, you'll dash forward at them with your melee and deal melee elemental damage. If it kills an enemy, this is a reset, as an 8-second cooldown and 100% increased melee damage. And it's another teleport, it does a ton of damage. So if you kill something, it resets. If not, it's just an 8-second cooldown. So next, we actually have 1 into Violent Tapestry. We'll talk about that pretty much in a minute. So then we have Anima, which 5 out of 5, which you get status effect damage increase, status effect duration increase, and action skill status effect damage increase as well. So a ton of basically elemental increases, elemental effect increase. And this is 8 out of 5 because of my class mod right now, so it's pretty high. We have 1 into Infusion that will help with our that should help with the deep dive face puncher gun, but this is also just to get lower in the tree as well. We have 5 out of 5 Tempest, which is increased elemental damage, then shock damage increase more. We have Illuminated Fist, which increases your melee damage, and your melee damage is converted to your action skill element, so 75% melee damage, and then whatever element you have on is what your melee is doing. And then we have 5 out of 5 Wildfire. Whenever you apply a status effect, there's a chance for it to spread, 40% chance. And this is also ties into this, because this build, you would think it's just a melee build, you're just doing heavy damage, but this build is actually really heavily focused on elemental effects, status effects, and spreading them to targets around you. So it's actually really cool how this works. Then we have Catharis. I can't pronounce for anything. Whenever Amara triggers an elemental effect on an enemy, when that enemy dies, the enemy explodes, dealing her attuned element damage. So basically, when you trigger an elemental effect on an enemy and then they die, it explodes, dealing your attuned element damage along with any other element that is currently afflicted upon that enemy. This goes a short cooldown, does 937 damage, has an 8-second cooldown. So basically, any element you have on a target, when they die, if there's elements on them, it blows up and does damage for every element on that target. Then we have Conflux. I have 1 point in this, but 1 on my class mod right now, which is still a decent chance. But whenever Amara applies a status effect to an enemy, she gains a chance to randomly electrocute, ignite, or melt that target. 14% chance right now. And what's really cool about this is we have spreading chances, we have increased chances, we have blowing up of elemental damage everywhere. So you're constantly having a ton of, status effects and elements on different things. So this has a pretty good chance to proc quite a bit. And for the abilities we're using, is actually ties a bind. So this is the ability that you grasp one enemy and then it links all the other enemies around it, so they take a percentage of the damage you do to the main one, which is really good. You're doing a ton of damage. Now for our augment, there's actually 2 things you can use. You can use Allure, which is the singularity, and what this helps with is when this, whatever this is pronounced, when this blows up every 8 seconds, it'll actually hit stuff a lot more frequently because they're all pulled in around you. So it helps with that, and it just helps enemies. It actually CCs enemies and throws them around. Then we also have what you can use is Glamour, which basically for this build, if Amara targets an enemy with phase grab, enemies near the grass target are confused. Now this makes your skill do less damage, which ours really doesn't do any. There's an 8-second cooldown, or 8-second duration, and the cooldown is increased from your action skill, even though our action skill still has a really low cooldown. But pretty much it confuses all the enemies and makes them attack each other, which is also a really strong just area CC. So either one, whichever one you want to do is really good. I've been leaning more towards Glamour most of the time, but Allure is still pretty good. Both of them are pretty good. They both have CC. Allure gives a little bit more damage from the explosion from this right here. Now, the reason we have Violent Tapestry is because not only are we using grass, so we can just keep stacking up tapestry without hitting anything and constantly getting the cooldown back, which basically this just increases the chance of us applying a status effect. But anytime we apply a status effect, we grant a stack of this. So even if we're not spamming grasp to constantly get up those stacks, we're still getting those stacks just from applying effects. We're spreading effects around to apply more effects to other targets. So overall, a lot of these talents are just working together and pretty much just applying status effects everywhere, doing a bunch of damage. Then we're grasping things and just punching them for a ridiculous amount of damage to spread that across all the enemies that are also getting stacks effects with that. So we're just destroying a ton of different enemies. And this is mainly built for me for killing bosses that you can actually hit with melee. So usually stuff like hunt bosses or stuff like that, not the big bosses that came with cutscenes the first time you fought them, but smaller named bosses are super good for this. Killing groups of enemies, like in the Circle of Slaughter, this is super good. It's really, really viable in the Circle of Slaughter, as you guys can see. and this is on my ham 3-inch vault other mode, so it's still really viable in here, especially with really good modifiers, which Circle Slaughter, you should always have good modifiers. But it's still really viable in this, and it's a good alternative to the other Amara builds. And it just, you know, breaks it up and brings out something new to play, especially because I farm Circle Slaughter quite a bit. It's not very good for a lot of the big bosses that would have cinematics before you fight them, especially ones that are harder to get to. I will be making a variation of this build that's pretty much specifically for boss fights. But that will be coming out at a later date. I still have some gear to get for that. But for the items we're using, pretty much I never switch off the deep dive face puncher. For now, I would love to get a deep dive face puncher with one of the general anointed buffs to it, which basically makes when you use your action skill, I think it's when you use your action skill, you gain 100% melee damage for a short time. That would be the best one because Phase Grasp does not have a melee damage increaser off the augment. But yeah, pretty much don't switch off deep dive phase puncher for this because it's pretty much doubling your damage. It's also doubling your healing. Because if you don't know, the healing from the melee lifesteal artifacts that I have right here actually is applied to the deep dive face puncher as well. So if you need to, you can just long range shoot something and heal 75% of the damage you just dealt. So pretty much you can long range full heal yourself anytime you want, pretty reliably. So that goes to the artifact. We have a really good melee lifesteal one, which is you know, the 75% melee lifesteal. Then I got the legendary basically an attribute on this, which deals 63% bonus elemental damage whenever you melee an enemy. Elemental type changes every 5 seconds. So basically when you're meleeing, you deal 63% more elemental damage, and that element will switch to anyone every 5 seconds. So every 5 seconds it switches, which is also really good because you could apply a status effect off any one of those elements. So you could actually have any elemental effect at any given point because it's constantly switching, which is really cool. And it's just a pretty big damage increase, 63% more damage basically. I would definitely like better, you know, stat rolls at the bottom of this, but overall this is a really good artifact. This is level 43 because I haven't gotten one with both these rolls on them since then, which is pretty crazy. Now there's two ways you can go about this with the class mod. So I'm using the class mod that when you use an action skill, you gain rush stacks, which give you weapon damage, which helps with our gun, I'm pretty sure, and then gives us action skill cooldown rate for the number of stacks, and this goes up to 15 because we have a violent tapestry one into that. So this maxed out at 15. So it's a lot of cooldown rate and a lot of weapon damage, which helps with constantly having enemies grasp, you know, with doing just more shotgun damage. Now there's also something you can replace this with, and that is an artifact I don't have because somehow I lost all mine. I don't know what I did with them, but the artifact that makes you take less damage the closer you are to a target, that's basically the legendary effect on that, and that class mod can actually roll and increase to find your center, the capstone talent right here, and that would double your melee damage increase on this to 200%, so another 100% melee damage, and double the melee range when this is active. So you're just teleporting at a lot further distances, and either of them, in my opinion, are viable. Once I get a really good roll again, because I somehow deleted all mine, I guess. Once I get a good roll on the other class mod, I'll probably be using that more, just because of the massive amount of melee damage and the tankiness. So I think it's max 29% damage reduction when you're close to a target, and if you're meleeing a target, you get 29% damage reduction. So if you're having difficulty surviving, that one's going to be better, and this one's going to be better just for more cooldown, pretty much. And a little bit extra damage. So the shield I'm using is a Brawler ward, which is 25% weapon damage when shield is depleted, 300% melee damage when shield is depleted, which is massive, 2% max health per second while shields are active, and this effect doubles when shields are depleted, so you get 4% health per second when shields are depleted. And even though we have mindfulness, which makes our shields regen really quickly, we're still getting this effect quite a bit, which is very nice. That's a lot of damage. And also, if you're trying to go, if you get any shield mod that has a really good anointed buff, like the 100% melee damage after action skill use anointed buff, something like that, it's probably going to be better than this. Basically, the dream would be, for me, with this specific build, it would be Brawler Ward with the generic anointed buff that increases your melee damage by 100% after skill use. That would be kind of the god tier role for this specific build. Grenade, I'm using Stormfront right now just because I'm staying on corrosive damage, and this has a really high damage per second basically status effect on it, and this is a Murph, so this is really cool. Basically, you throw this out and it shoots out a bunch of other grenades, and then it basically pops up in the air pretty much and electrocutes everything around it. So it's a really good grenade. If you have any other god tier rolls, it's going to be really good. I don't like using pipe bomb on this build because I'm moving around so much, and I'll kill myself with pipe bomb way too much. Good epic centers can be really, or epicenter can be really good. I know there's like some ridiculous rolled rainstorms, I think they're called, where they drop fireballs from the sky. I know there's some really good crazy possible rolls from that, but you know, pretty much any really good grenade mod is going to help you. One you're not going to kill yourself with because you're in melee. So that's pretty much everything for this build. I will be having footage after this of a decent-ish roll of Mayhem 3 modifiers in Circle Slaughter, then a pretty good roll, almost perfect roll, and just so you guys can see the difference between that. In Circle of Slaughter, you guys should pretty much always be trying to go and re-rolling so you get really good rolls for your modifiers, because you could farm Circle Slaughter an unlimited amount of times without having to log off and change your modifiers. So subscribe if you want to see more Borderlands for content. Leave a like if you liked the video. Leave a comment down below what you think about this new melee build for Amara, and thanks for watching.
After that last performance, I must say you got my brothers and sisters shaking in their collective booties. But I got a good feeling about our chances on this one. Walk on, player. Another Circle of Slaughter, sponsored by me. Card. Fuck yeah!